Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into something pretty intense, the military balance in Northeast Asia, which is shifting and fast. Think about this. What happens when one country's whole strategy is just overwhelming its enemies with sheer numbers, while its rival is busy building this super high-tech, supposedly impenetrable shield? Well, we're about to find out. All right, so let's get right into it. If you just look at the numbers, on paper, the 2026 military rankings seem to paint a really simple picture. You've got Japan sitting comfortably as a top 10 global power. I mean, they're an economic and tech giant. And then, way down the list, you've got North Korea trailing at number 31. Kind of looks like a classic David versus Goliath setup, doesn't it? Yeah, but it's not even close. The thing is, behind those simple rankings, there's this quiet but incredibly dramatic arms race heating up. And we're not just talking about who has the most tanks or planes. No, this is much deeper. This is about two totally clashing strategies, two competing philosophies of war. So let's start with North Korea's big play here. For years, their military strength was kind of sliding, trending downwards. But all of a sudden, Pyongyang has completely reversed that decline. And it's not because they're just building more of their same old stuff. It's all thanks to a new, really powerful, and honestly, a deeply consequential partnership. What this really boils down to is a quid pro quo with Russia. North Korea's been sending a ton of stuff to help the war in Ukraine. We're talking over 11,000 troops and just massive stockpiles of artillery shells. But what they're getting back in return? Well, it's way more valuable. They're getting what amounts to a generational leap in their own military tech. And look, this is not just some minor upgrade. We're talking about the real deal here. Reactor modules from old Russian nuclear submarines, advanced naval missile systems for their brand new destroyers, and the really critical stuff, like satellite and missile guidance tech. Russia is literally handing over some of the crown jewels of its military, which is pushing North Korea's strategic programs forward by years, maybe even decades. And you can already see this partnership paying off in a big way. North Korea has already handed over more than 50 of its new KN-25 rocket systems to its frontline units. But here's the thing. These are not your ordinary rockets. The key thing to get here is that this isn't old-school artillery. The KN-25 is what they call a super-large rocket system. And here's the kicker. According to Pyongyang, they can carry tactical nuclear weapons. Their entire job is to just saturate, to completely overwhelm defenses across the entire Korean peninsula, and even hit military bases in Japan. It's basically brute force, but supercharged with a nuclear threat. And this quote just perfectly sums up their whole strategy. It's all about asymmetric warfare. Look, they know they can't go toe-to-toe with Japan or the US, dollar for dollar or fighter jet for fighter jet. So what do? They use mass and that terrifying threat of nukes to create fear and basically level the playing field. Okay, so that's one side of the coin. How is Japan responding to all this? Well, faced with this new, aggressive reality, Japan is in the middle of the most radical shakeup of its military since the end of World War II. Period. And it all starts with money. A lot of money. A record-breaking defense budget request for 2026, over $60 billion. I mean, just think about that. That is a staggering number, up 50% from just a few years back. And believe me, every single yen of that is going toward a totally new vision for their national defense. This huge budget is fueling a historic change in their entire military doctrine. You see, for decades, the US-Japan alliance was always described as a shield and spear. The US was the spear, the offensive part, and Japan was the defensive shield. But now, with this new counterstrike capability, Japan is forging its very own spear. And they're moving fast to deploy a whole suite of new weapons to make that spear real. They're juicing up the range on their homegrown Type 12 missiles. They're buying Tomahawks from the US that can reach 1,600 kilometers. They're even developing their own hypersonic weapons and converting ships into carriers for F-35 stealth jets. It's a huge upgrade. So Tokyo's strategy is crystal clear. It's not just about offense. They're pairing this powerful new spear with one of the most advanced missile defense systems on the planet. We're talking multiple layers, from Aegis destroyers out at sea to Patriot batteries on land. The goal? Build a technological wall so high and a spear so sharp that nobody would even think about attacking them. It's all about peace through overwhelming strength. But of course, neither of these countries is acting alone. They're both part of bigger alliances, And those alliances are changing too, and changing at a really striking speed.
So, for the first time in 60 years, the US and Japan are basically rewiring how their militaries work together. In March of 2025, Japan kicked off its first ever Joint Operations Command, the JJOC. And right in step, the US is upgrading its own command in Japan from just an administrative hub into a real, honest to goodness warfighting headquarters. The whole point is to create this seamless structure so they can plan in real time, especially for something as complex as a coordinated counterstrike.
Okay, so let's pull back for a second. What does all of this mean for Northeast Asia in 2026? What does this new landscape of power actually look like on the ground?
What we're left with is a really, really unstable situation. You've got this balance of power that's defined by two totally different, competing ideas about how to fight. You got Japan betting everything on technological superiority, its alliance with the US, and that high-tech shield and spear. And on the other side, North Korea is going all in on asymmetric warfare, nuclear blackmail, and that low-cost brute force saturation sword.
So you have Japan's super precise, high-tech defense being directly challenged by North Korea's strategy of just overwhelming everything with a nuclear threat. And that creates this incredibly high-stakes environment where just one wrong move, one misinterpretation of what the other side is doing, one small incident that escalates, could have absolutely devastating consequences for everyone.
And that brings us to the final and most crucial question of all. In a world of high-tech shields and these saturation swords, what does deterrence even look like anymore? When one side is building a perfect shield and the other is building an unstoppable sword, how in the world do you keep them from colliding? That's the question that's going to define the security and maybe the fate of the entire region for years to come.